Thanks so much for joining us today. It's so good to have you back on. Before we get into today's episode, why don't you take a few moments to subscribe to my Substack? The goal is to write a newsletter every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Eventually, we're not quite there yet, but you should subscribe for whenever I start doing that again. You can also find me on social media. You can follow the show at the Ishaan S Show on Instagram. You can follow at Real Ishaan Shrivastava if you want to stay in touch with me. And you can also find me on Blue Sky at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. All right, so before we get into today's episode, I wanted to take a couple of moments to note a pretty important thing. For longtime listeners of the show, and you might follow us on Instagram and stuff, you might know that today, June 4th, is actually the 4th anniversary of this show. It's a big deal for me personally, and actually this episode is also the 100th episode, which is just insane to think about. It was not planned for it to be that way. I just figured that we were approaching 100 episodes, so I knew the 4th anniversary was today, but I was counting the episodes a few nights ago, and I realized that this episode was going to be our 100th episode. So I just wanted to take a couple of moments to recognize the 4th anniversary and 100th episode of this show. Longtime listeners of the show know that this whole thing was initially a summer project when I was 14 years old, and in the years since, it's become something much bigger than that. I've covered all sorts of stories, whether it was the Afghanistan withdrawal, the 2022 midterms, the 2024 election, the first few months of the second Trump administration. Everything that we have seen in the last 4 years, I've had the amazing privilege to cover some of these big stories, talk about how I feel about what's going on. And I've also been able to connect with so many of you. And I've been able to interview some amazing folks. I have another exciting interview I'm so honored to share with you, which is going to be later in the episode. But there's just something about this show. I want to just take a few moments of personal privilege here. We live in a country where we still have this thing called freedom of speech and freedom of democracy, or freedom of speech and freedom of press. Of course, we also have democracy. But in a country where freedom of speech and freedom of the press are protected, it is an honor to be a part of that process in some way, shape, or form. I know I don't have the biggest platform, but my goal isn't to be the biggest or to be the best. My goal has always been the same with this show. And that is to get more young people interested in politics, informed about politics, and excited about politics. And oftentimes I get that it's hard to really invigorate that. But as long as we all continue to pay attention, and as long as we all care about how our country is being run, I think we're always going to be on a path of building a better country. And so with this show, in the 4 years and the 100 episodes that we've been able to do all of this work, it has been my honor and privilege to be a part of that process in some way, shape, or form. I read every comment, I read every email, I read every message I get, and it touches my heart when someone says that an episode they might have watched was the reason they decided to vote, or they learned more about an issue, or they just wanted to get more involved after learning about something. It's why I'm reminded about why this work matters so much. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all your support these past 4 years. I know we're celebrating 4 years and 100 episodes. Here's to 4 more years and 100 more episodes and a lot more beyond that. Thank you for all your love and support. Keep listening to the show. Share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to help this grow. But all right, let's get into our episode today. So before that, I know I'm doing a lot of befores. I'm really excited to share my interview with candidate for Wisconsin Democratic Party Chair, Joe Zepecki. It's a really good interview. We had a great discussion, and you can go to that in just a bit. But for today's episode, we are talking again about the big ugly bill. The big ugly bill is going full steam ahead. We covered it in our episode last Wednesday, and really, the thing that we talked about, the biggest thing we talked about was how Republicans were conflicted over whether or not it made enough cuts to programs like Medicare and food stamps. According to some Republicans, it didn't make enough cuts. And we also talked about how Elon Musk was not very happy about this bill. Well, we've gotten even more criticism from him. But I think if we want to really capture the Republican perspective on this whole idea of tax cuts for the wealthiest among us while cutting off people in need from important social services, I think we should take a look at Senator Joni Ernst. Senator Ernst represents Iowa in the US Senate. And so she decided to hold a town hall in her state on a Friday at 7:30 a.m. I think everyone understands why a senator would want to hold a town hall with her constituents at 7:30 a.m. on a Friday. Still, plenty of people did show up to that. And there was this really interesting exchange when there was discussion about people being taken off of healthcare. Someone in the crowd said that people are going to die. Now, you're going to want to listen to what Senator Ernst said. It's kind of shocking coming from a US senator. Take a look.
So, people are not, well, we all are going to die. So, for heaven's sakes.
Well, we're all going to die anyway. Might as well pluck people off healthcare, right? Like, the insensitivity of the entire Republican Party right now with this bill is just unbelievable. How on earth does a party that prides itself on supporting the working class is also perfectly fine with tearing so many people off of their health care, and they just play it off as everyone's gonna die anyway, so we might as well pluck people off of health care to give our rich friends a tax break? It's ridiculous. Now, you would think that after the backlash that Senator Ernst faced, that an ounce of shame would compel her to at least, I don't know, apologize or acknowledge. But, Republican senator be Republican senator, I guess, nowadays. She actually doubled down on her crazy statement. I'm just going to play some of that here, but take a look.
I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a statement that I made yesterday at my town hall. I was in the process of answering a question that had been asked by an audience member when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die." And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well.
Nothing screams party of working class like mocking people who are genuinely concerned about being ripped off of healthcare. Nothing screams working class more than giving tax cuts to the richest among us. But that is exactly what the Republican Party is doing. This out-of-touch approach to this whole policy, it's shocking and it's baffling. Like, how on earth are we supposed to reconcile with the fact that these people are governing? The depravity and the out-of-touch nature of Senator Ernst's comments are unfortunately too common. It represents really, I think, the attitude of the governing party. There are some folks like Senator Josh Hawley who are opposing the bill because of Medicaid cuts, and they might have to because they want to win re-election, I'm sure. And if they cut people off of Medicaid, people in their states won't be happy. But for a lot of other senators who maybe don't understand that or aren't paying attention, the out-of-touch reaction to so much is just unacceptable. It is unacceptable. So the big ugly bill, like I said, tax cuts, takes people off of their health care. And we'll talk about the Congressional Budget Office in just a moment and talk about exactly what those projections look like, as well as cutting environmental protections, the judicial package I talked about last week. There's just so much. Now, one critic is former First Buddy and the president's top campaign donor, Elon Musk, who has actually criticized this bill a lot. He labeled the bill, quote, "a disgusting abomination." And he warned that it could severely impact companies like Tesla And he's also worried about the spending cuts. He thinks that it undermines all of the disastrous spending cuts that he imposed during his reign of terror on the federal government. He is also opposing the bill. So when Elon Musk is also opposing the bill, progressives are against the bill, obviously, for the reasons that they should be. It's hard to really see the future for this entire package. But folks like Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump are all doubling down on this bill and fighting even harder to make sure that this bill gets passed. And again, we are going to see impacts that I don't know are going to be understood very quickly. But I think the most damning thing we got was this morning when the Congressional Budget Office released some really important projections as a result of the big ugly bill. First, they said that this bill is going to add $2.4 trillion to the deficit. Huge. They are going to balloon the deficit. That is going to be terrible for our interest rates. That is going to be terrible for the longevity of our country's fiscal health. That is going to be disastrous in all sorts of ways. There's some type of spending where, yes, you spend to support, and then there's spending like this. It's unpaid tax cuts that are going to balloon our deficit, for all the criticism that Republicans levy on the other side for 4 years of Joe Biden. They sure as heck seem to be really excited about ballooning how much debt people have to pay. And it's the worst thing is that young people are going to have to pay for it. Young people are going to be dealing with the ramifications of this deficit ballooning approach. And another important projection is, it says, particularly when it comes to the issue of healthcare, 11 million people will be taken off of their healthcare plan in order to fund these tax cuts. So the Republican Party, which has claimed for so long to be the party of the working class, which has claimed for so long to be the party of family values, is going to hurt everyday Americans, take them off their healthcare, and fund unpaid tax cuts and balloon the deficit. So that's really where the big ugly bill stands. We'll be keeping track of how this bill moves forward. It seems like there's going to be at least some movement in the Senate as more sides and areas of belief converge and we have a broader discussion. But we'll be keeping an eye here at the Ishaan S Show. Stick around, stay in touch. I have a very exciting interview with a candidate to be the next Democratic Party chairman of Wisconsin. That's coming up right after this. It's a great interview, and we actually talk a lot about the big ugly bill, so you don't want to miss it. And we also get to talk about plans for the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. So stick around. If you want to watch the full version, you can go to my Substack. It'll be there. If not, stick around. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you after the interview in just a few moments. Alrighty, thanks so much for joining us back. So you might remember we covered the Wisconsin Supreme Court election just a few weeks ago. That was a pretty big turnaround for Democrats, as you might know. Judge Susan Crawford won that very important Supreme Court seat, winning more votes than any candidate for governor, Republican candidate for governor in the state of Wisconsin's history. Pretty big feat. Now, we can always talk about the candidates, and we can always talk about the folks who are on the ground. But there is another element that I don't think a lot of people get to see in this whole field, and that's the internal party infrastructure. In this case, it was the Democratic Party of Wisconsin that played a huge role in helping get the word out about Susan Crawford and helping get the message out about what she was fighting for. And so I don't think we talk about that enough. But some news that came after the election was the current chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Ben Wickler, announced that he would be stepping down from his role as chair of the party. And so with his departure, there's been a new race to replace him with 3 candidates running in this race. And so I am so honored to have on one of those candidates to talk about his vision for the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, to talk politics and a lot more. To do all of that, we are joined today by Joe Zepecki. Joe, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm honored to be here. I was honored before I knew it's the 4-year anniversary of the show. Now I'm even more fired up to be here, man. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Before we get into the interview, why don't you take a few moments to introduce yourself to my audience?
Yeah, so I'm a Milwaukee native, born and raised, who was a someone who got a very early start in politics. It depends on how you count. I think we officially call it when my dad ran for the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, and I was the ripe old age of 11 and was promised a dog if he won. So I threw myself into the campaign. He won. I didn't get the dog. I probably should have learned something about politicians at that point. As soon as the race was called, it was no, no, no. I said we'd talk about getting a dog, not that you'd get
Uh,
one. But I was hooked, and like I was that kid who the summer before my freshman year of high school volunteered on a congressional campaign full time and
oh,
was
wow.
involved in student government, both in high school and college. I had my first two paid jobs working on campaigns while I was in college. And then when I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I moved out to Washington, D.C., was there for about 3 years, managed to work on races all over the country, getting people like now Senator Chris Murphy elected to Congress for the first time in 2006. And then 2007 and 2008, I ran all over the country. I worked in like 5 or 6 different states, just trying to, make a difference, have an impact, support candidates I believed in. And after the 2008 election cycle, I moved back to DC. I was fortunate enough to get a political appointment in the Obama administration during the first term. So I served in a senior communications role at one of the agencies, which we can talk about during our interview. And then after 2.5 years of that, decided to move back home to my beloved Wisconsin. I was part of the Obama Biden reelection campaign in 2012. I was the communications director. I was in that similar role for the 2014 campaign for governor. And then in 2016, I founded my company, Zepecki Communications, where we provide communications and strategy consulting services to mostly issue advocacy groups, some candidates. And we've been able to work on things that we really care about, protecting Obamacare and making sure healthcare is more accessible and more affordable, working with building trades unions to make sure that it's Wisconsin union workers who build our clean energy future, things like that. And along the way, started a family and I coached football at the high school I played at in the 1900s, is how our players put it. It's a little rude, but it is true that my 3 years of varsity football were 97, 98, and 99.
Oh,
So I've been,
barely.
yeah, so I've been, it's why it's even funnier, actually. So I've been doing that for the last 7 years. I coached some basketball, youth basketball in our community. I just try to give back, man. And to be candid, like running for state party chair was not ever something that I imagined or envisioned or aspired to, but I've always been somebody who, when I see a challenge, I try to be part of the solution. When help is needed, I try to give it. And I do think that this moment that we're at, we're one of the biggest challenges facing Democrats, not just here in Wisconsin, but nationally, is really in the communications and messaging space. I think I'm uniquely suited to help address some of those issues, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Um, I think it's helpful to break down exactly what that role looks like, because even the folks that I have had on the show previously over the years, like I think generally have candidates. The internal infrastructure, those types of roles, I don't think have a very outward facing role. So maybe that's something you do bring to the table in terms of that communications background. I think that's great.
Yeah, and when you think about like what is the job, like I describe sort of the role and how it fits, but when you think about like
Yeah.
what does the chair do, the chair is part cheerleader. We've seen Ben Wickler on Pod Save America and MSNBC. That's part of it. You are, a messenger, a communicator for the party. You're also somebody who is responsible for raising the money that, funds the operations, and you're setting the tone and, establishing the culture and the priorities and the goals in ongoing collaboration with all of the other partners across sort of the broader we of Democrats. I'm talking about myself here, right? It's like
Hmm.
there will be a campaign for governor next year. Maybe it'll be Governor Evers again. Maybe it'll be a primary, and then we'll have a nominee. There is a state Senate Democratic caucus whose job it is to get control of the state Senate and elect Democratic state senators. There's also a part of the puzzle that is the Assembly Democratic Campaign Caucus. And then there's individual campaigns for Congress and the US Senate and in presidential election years. So there's lots of different entities all trying to win as Democrats that are part of the broader landscape. And the role of the state party chair is to figure out how to collaborate, how to align strategies, and how to make sure we're doing the most to maximize those precious dollars that people get, whether it's $5 or $500,000. When people say, I care about Democrats, I'm a Democrat and I want to support them, you got to make sure you're spending those dollars wisely and you're putting them to good work across all of those different, sometimes competing organizations and campaigns with different strategies, right? Like, to just give one example of like how hard that could be is like, there will be campaigns in parts of this state that sometimes will say, in order to win, we have to get the votes of people who are voting for Donald Trump, right? Yeah. And there are other parts of the state where they say, I'm a Democrat running for Congress or the state house, and I will win if only people who vote for Kamala Harris vote for me in my district. And that is a big job to sort of balance those competing priorities, make sure people are aligned on the goals, and understand, even where there's differences in strategies, how to maximize the spend of those dollars to make sure we're winning as much power as possible so we can make changes that I think we all want to see.
It's very true. I like to say Wisconsin is the center of the political universe. I was able to be there. Listeners, viewers know that I was working out of Wisconsin for the past few months during the presidential, during the Supreme Court. I have gotten to speak to a lot of people in all those competing interests that you mentioned, whether it's the Senate Democrats, the House Democrats, or other folks on the ground. And I think I heard from one member of the Assembly, for example, who said that this race for party chair is going to be really important because there are too many things going on that are going to be converging in 2026. You have the governor's race you mentioned. There's talk about flipping the legislature. There's so much for you to deal with if you are to be elected. What will be your day one priority? What do you go in thinking about right now, even?
Yeah, so there's three main things the party does, and it's been helpful for me to think about all three of them. The first is money. That's the fundraising piece, and my approach is pretty straightforward. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The money part is going well, and so I've already had conversations with members of that team, which includes not just the staff, but it's the broader. It is the governors, Ever, and Senators Baldwin, and Congress people, and the folks who all play a role in raising the money. We have to continue to do that, or everything else becomes much more difficult. So, day one, give me my call list, give me my schedule, tell me what you need from me. I view myself as a tool who is like deployable in pursuit of raising those dollars. On the organizing and infrastructure front, like, what is the backbone of the party, and how do we hear about things like year-round organizing. What does that look like? I think we need to make some changes in terms of how we organize. I think I refer to it as fine-tuning. What Ben Wickler and his team have built is extraordinary. And as I mentioned up top, 49 other state parties would love to have the problems that we have. They would love that what they were dealing with was a lot of feeling out around the state that the approach has become too top-down and too one-size-fits-all, where the way you organize Dane or Milwaukee is very different than how you organize Vernon County or Crawford County or Rusk County. And we need to have an approach that is flexible enough to respect the different ways you organize different communities in different parts of the state. And so we're going to, get the team together and figure out how can we do better when it comes to organizing in our infrastructure. And then third is the message. By the way, sometimes people refer to these three main things: money, organization, and message as mom. We all love our moms. And so on the messaging front, I really think we kind of got to start over. We need to challenge every assumption about how the Democratic Party communicates. And that'll start with an immediate sort of audit of like, what is every single thing we do that both internally and externally communicates our message on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. And then we're going to tear it apart and we're going to rebuild rapidly to make sure that we are utilizing 21st century tools, using all of the mediums to communicate to folks, to empower more messengers to be part of the solution, as opposed to just waiting for some elected official somewhere to say something so compelling enough we could try to make it go viral on, TikTok or, on Reels, whatever.
Yeah.
That's not the way the world works. If we care about this stuff, if we are opting in to being part of the solution, we have a role to play as a messenger. And so that work will start day one. And I believe in the power of leadership. I believe that culture is really, really important. And one of the just like cultural things we need to change as a party is we got to start saying it with our chest. I am so sick of Democratic politicians and communicators who walk around like they are embarrassed about being Democrats. We don't have anything to be embarrassed about, right? We got to say it with our chest. And the way the world works, when you speak with, passion and enthusiasm and credibility, people will believe you, even if they disagree with you. And right now, that is just like one small thing that if we just did that a little bit better and had more passionate communicators, we would be so much more effective as a party. So that's a lot for day one, but it's a big job with a lot of work to do.
Let's switch gears a bit. I want to talk a little bit about politics. I mean, it wouldn't be a normal Ishaan S show interview without that. So we have what they're calling the big beautiful bill. I mean, on the show, I've called it the big ugly bill.
I'll go you one better.
Yeah.
The billionaires boondoggle bananas bill.
Can I
curse? Can I curse on this? Do we go blue?
I think so.
It's actually a bullshit billionaires boondoggle of a bill. Right? Like we can play word games too. The idea that you would cut taxes for the super rich and pay for it by kicking the working poor off of their health care and food assistance is bullshit. And we should just call it that.
And Senator Joni Ernst's answer, I'm sure you've caught it, and we played it earlier in the episode, is that we're all just going to die anyway. So we might as well take everyone off their health care, right? I mean, there are so many examples of why the big ugly bill, or all sorts of names that we could go with, is going to hurt America. Now, when we take it back to the context of Wisconsinites, how is this going to hurt people across the state? I mean, it will, but like, what should people now have to prepare for in the event that the U.S. Senate at least passes some parts of that bill?
Yeah. I'm going to start with healthcare. More than 1 million Wisconsinites are on Medicaid. And one of the challenges is, even if you're not on Medicaid, I guarantee you know someone who is, but you don't know it as Medicaid. This is a trick of like communications and marketing and branding, right? The Wisconsin version of Medicaid is called Badger Care. Yeah. Well, it's more likely you know somebody who says, "Oh, I'm on Badger Care. That's how I get my health care." The state children's health insurance program, SCHIP, is a Medicaid provision. The Katie Beckett and Iris programs, or the long-term care waivers, those are all Medicaid programs that get different names because that's how the government works, but they all serve different purposes and needs, right? Because to qualify for Medicaid, you can be at the end of your life and have exhausted your finances and your Social Security doesn't cover hospice care at the end, or assisted living. And so the government says it's in the interest of our society for those folks to have a place to get care so they're not out on the street, right? And part of the second and third order impacts of that is those are jobs for people who take care of them and ensure that they leave the world with dignity, right? On the far other end of the spectrum, you have, and I've met some of these families, you have young people who are born with pre-existing conditions. You want to talk about bullshit? How can you be born with a pre-existing condition, right? Literally. Some folks are born with medical challenges that are very expensive, right? It can be anybody from an infant or a newborn with a heart defect to hearing challenges to rare, conditions that require a lot of medical care because we live in the greatest country in the world and have for generations invested in science and research and innovation when it comes to healthcare. So we can keep people alive and they can live fulfilling lives of dignity, even if they have severe, challenges that we would sometimes refer to as handicaps, right? And so I've heard one story in February and it's really stuck with me because I think there is this assumption that, or sort of like hangover effect of something Republicans have tried to do to just say, oh, people are just scamming the system, right? Like Medicaid's just all these welfare queens who just want their free healthcare. And that is not who this program is for. And that is not who Democrats are fighting to protect. I met a woman by the name of Jessica. She and her husband both work. They have employer sponsored healthcare, which means, yeah, a little bit of it comes out of their paycheck, but like they have pretty good healthcare. And when their son was born, he had some challenges that their health insurance could not cover. They would have been kicked off of it. Like their employers probably would have had to like find an entirely new healthcare plan because the cost of caring for this young person was so much. And so they get what's called Katie Beckett Medicaid. And that is financial support to ensure that their little guy can go to school and learn and grow and develop. And what Republicans are now trying to do with this bill is say, doesn't matter that both parents work, doesn't matter that the physical limitations that young man has are never going to go away, right? This is not something you cure from. It's like a broken leg that heals. It is a lifelong challenge. Instead of certifying that medical condition once or once a year, all of a sudden, they're going to make the reporting requirements more frequent and more disruptive to that family's life. Well, what happens if they miss an appointment or they miss a piece of paper in the stack? Now they can kick that young man off Medicaid. Now mom or dad has to lose their job to provide full-time care for their son, which hurts our economy, hurts the community. And they probably get the employer of the parent who continues working kicked off of their health insurance. How the hell does that make sense? The answer is it doesn't. Republicans' proposal in the House version of the reconciliation bill will cause, at minimum, 10 million Americans to lose access to health care. That is not right. That is not just. And that is without the context of the reason they're doing it is so they can cut taxes for Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk again. And when you look at this bill in its entirety, I want folks to understand this and check me on it. Get on ChatGPT, get on Google, find the stories for yourself. But if you make $4 million a year under this bill, you would get a $400,000 benefit to your net worth. If you make $40,000 a year, your net worth will go down. That is the greatest transfer of wealth in this country's history, from the poor and the working poor and those trying to get into the middle class to the elite, uber wealthy, unlike anything we've ever seen. And along the way, it explodes the deficit. It potentially knocks us into a debt spiral where the way the bond and long-term treasury markets will respond will mean that interest rates go up, which mean that you want to buy a car? Guess what? The interest rates are higher. You want to buy a home? Guess what? The interest rates are higher. Republicans who ran on a platform of we're going to lower your costs are instead saying, don't listen to what we said back then. Just trust us. Tax cuts solve everything. And what it's going to do is make you pay more for the stuff you buy every day. That is the definition of bullshit.
It's honestly it's wrong. It's unconscionable.
Yeah.
But I wonder, for example, I think in a couple episodes ago, we were talking about Ron Johnson, who actually plans on opposing the bill in its current text because it doesn't go far enough.
I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah.
When we talk about characters like Ron Johnson and other folks too, not passing this bill because it doesn't go far enough, it doesn't kick enough people off of Medicare, it doesn't hurt enough Americans. How, like, we ended up in this situation because something went wrong. And now, no, I mean, we'll have damage done by the time it's time to fix it. But when we're looking ahead to 2026, and we're talking about getting these people out across the country, specifically in Wisconsin, I mean, you have, again, plenty of people that we could be targeting out there. What is the message that is going to work? And because I don't think it's possible for Democrats to just run on, they took away your health care. Like, there needs to be an affirmative message to go along with it.
Yeah.
So how do you think, when we're looking at 2026, what do you think the biggest issues are going to be, and what is the best way for Democrats to take this stuff that they're doing right now and actually deliver it to the American people in a way that identifies exactly how they're hurting us?
So the complicated answer to that question is that in a target-rich environment where Donald Trump and Republicans are breaking everything they touch, and while we live in an information environment where everybody can find what conforms to their previously held notions, it is harder than ever to say, well, here are the two things. We're just going to talk about cuts to the VA that attempt to live up to our promises to veterans, and we're going to talk about cost of living. Well, what about due process? What about snatching students who signed op-eds mildly critical of Donald Trump's preferred foreign policy vision? What about actual comprehensive immigration reform that allows the best and the brightest to come to this country? What about an assault on law firms? Well, they're white shoe law firms. Well, they play an important part in our system. What about assaults on universities? They're not going to stop with Harvard and Yale and Penn. They're going to keep coming. And so when you have that much under siege and at risk, part of the communication strategy has to be talk about what you are passionate about, right? Because even if Ishaan cares about something as a top issue that is different than what I care about, I am going to trust you and find you more credible because you are talking about something you're passionate about than if you're reading off a sheet from some consultant in Washington, D.C. It's like, it says here, the Democratic Party is fighting for lower costs and better access to health care. And it's language that doesn't mean anything, and it was focus group to death. Like, we don't need that. We got to get out there and say it with our chest that Democrats are the party of economic opportunity. No matter what you look like, who you love, where you live, the station of life that your parents or grandparents had, if you are willing to work hard and play by the rules, you can make it in America. That is what we need to get back to. And there's a lot of policy particulars that go into that, and it ranges from cracking down on monopolies to enforcing antitrust laws to regulating industries that are nickel and diming us at every single turn. It's all of the above. But the story we have to tell is that America is better than this small man occupying the White House and a party full of sycophantic cowards bending the knee and abandoning every principle they ever professed to believe in. The fact that they are doing that is not the fault of the voters. It is not the fault of people who cast a ballot for Donald Trump. Those folks are pissed, and they have reason to be, right? Oh, yeah. Think about how pissed you have to be to vote for that flawed a human being. It's not a surprise. People know the guy sucks, but they're so upset by a system that rewards wealth and makes it harder and harder for working people to go, man, whatever, let's vote for the asshole. Let's vote for the guy who is the walking, talking middle finger to an establishment that doesn't work for me. And what we need to do next year is communicate to those folks, we hear you, we see you, And unlike the Republicans who lied to you for years and tricked you into voting for them, we mean it when we say we're the party of working people and of economic opportunity. You want to go to college? You should have an opportunity to go to college. You want to go into a trade? You should have the opportunity to go into a trade. You want to start your own small business? Great. Here's where you go to get the loan. That is the democratic way, and it is how we actually right the ship as a country.
It's a really good message. Unfortunately, we are almost out of time. But before I do let you go, why don't you take these next few moments to just have a couple parting thoughts for my audience, if you have any?
Well, so the most important thing is if you are concerned about what you're seeing, step up, find a way to contribute. That can mean different things for different people. If you got five or $50, give it to an organization or a cause you care about. If you have some time, find a way to volunteer and give of your time, because the only way we push back is by rising up and resisting. That doesn't have to look political. I'm not trying to get everybody to go volunteer to knock doors for the Democratic Party. Food pantries are in need, right? Service organizations need help. Habitat for Humanity, Boys and Girls Club. The needs are increasing. Find a way to give back. That is how we ultimately, knock this back and get our country back on course. If you are interested in getting involved in politics, you should also do that. You can have an incredibly rewarding experience and time, whether you're volunteering, whether it's a career path for you. You will never regret being part of something bigger than yourself in pursuit of a better world. And if I know anything after, more than like almost 30 years of doing this, from that 11-year-old who was lied to by that politician dad about getting a dog, I don't regret any of it, because I feel like I've made a difference. Sometimes a very small difference, but it is lots of little small differences that make big change possible. So my final thought, whether you're able to vote for me or involved in the Democratic Party or not, is to find a way to contribute to a cause greater than yourself. You will never regret it.
All right. Well, Joe Zepecki, thank you so much for joining us here at the Ishaan S Show. We'll be keeping track of how things go over at the convention in just a few days. We're wishing you the very best of luck. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you on very soon.
Thanks, man.
All righty. All righty. That was my interview with candidate for chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, Joe Zepecki. Thank you so much to Mr. Zepecki for joining us for an episode of the Ishaan S Show. If you liked my commentary, then please subscribe to the Ishaan S Show. And if you want to stay in touch with me, why don't you take a moment to subscribe to my Substack? Like I said, you can get newsletters sent to your inbox every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday to get my thought on the world of politics. You can scan the QR code on your screen over there. And we can stay connected on social media. You can follow the show on Instagram at the Ishaan S Show. You can follow me at Real Ishaan Shrivastava on Instagram, and on Blue Sky, ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. So as we mark 4 years and 100 episodes of the Ishaan S Show, once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all of your love and support. This is only possible because of you. So please continue to support the show the way you have been, and I will continue to do this job, which I love so much. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.